What if one of the biggest lessons about wealth and economic power came from a city built more than 1,000 years ago? While much of Western Europe was fragmented and economically local, one city was doing the opposite. It was connecting people, goods, money, and ideas across enormous distances. That city was Baghdad too. Its rise wasn't simply luck or geography. It was built around a system designed to make wealth move. In 762, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur ordered the construction of a new capital. Baghdad was placed along the Tigris River, close to the crossroads of some of the most important trade routes of the medieval world. Baghdad was sitting in the middle of a massive economic network. But geography alone doesn't create prosperity. What made Baghdad different was how deliberately it was designed to use its location. Roads, canals, markets, taxation, administration, and legal systems helped goods and money move through the city. The Abbasids weren't simply ruling territory, they were managing a system, and that system created something incredibly valuable: trust. This wasn't occasional trade. It was continuous. The city wasn't just trading, it was coordinating. And that required more than physical coins. Carrying gold and silver across deserts and oceans was risky and inefficient, so merchants increasingly relied on credit and early financial instruments that allowed value to move without physically transporting large amounts of precious metal. A merchant could deposit money in one place and access it somewhere else through trusted networks. That made capital easier, faster, and safer to move. Courts helped settle disputes. Contracts could be enforced. Reputation mattered. The state didn't need to control every transaction. It needed to create an environment where transactions could happen, and that distinction is crucial. Wealth doesn't grow simply because people have money. It grows when money can circulate. But Baghdad's success went far beyond commerce. It also invested heavily in knowledge. The Abbasids supported a massive translation movement, bringing mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and engineering from Greek, Persian, Indian, and other traditions into Arabic. This wasn't just intellectual curiosity. Knowledge had economic value. Baghdad had created something unusual for its time, an economy where knowledge itself became an economic asset. But Baghdad's story isn't a fairy tale. The Abbasid world still had inequality, political struggles, and conflict. Its real achievement was structural. Baghdad became wealthy because it reduced friction. It made it easier to move goods, money, information, and people across enormous distances. And that gives us the first major lesson: wealth follows connection. This is what made Baghdad so remarkable. Its wealth did not rest on one mine, one crop, or one conquest. It rested on the ability to keep different parts of the world connected and make that connection economically useful. But eventually, the system began to weaken. The Abbasid Caliphate became enormous. Regional governors gained more independence. Military leaders became more powerful, while tax revenues became harder to coordinate. The system that had created trust and stability slowly began to fragment. And when coordination weakens, everything becomes more expensive. Contracts become harder to enforce. Credit becomes riskier. Long-distance trade becomes harder to maintain. Political struggles made things worse. Military spending increased. Short-term extraction began replacing long-term investment. Still, Baghdad survived for centuries. That matters because economic decline is rarely instant. Strong systems can absorb shocks for a long time. But eventually, an already weakened system can face a shock it can no longer absorb. In 1258, Mongol forces under Hulagu reached Baghdad. The city fell. Infrastructure was destroyed. Libraries were burned, and administrative continuity collapsed. The destruction was catastrophic. But the Mongols weren't destroying a perfectly functioning system. They were delivering the final blow to one that had already lost much of its internal coordination. Once that coordination disappeared, prosperity unraveled. Trade networks broke apart. Credit became harder to maintain. Skilled workers scattered. Institutions lost their support. And this is the dark mirror of Baghdad's rise. The same connectivity that created its wealth also meant that losing connectivity could destroy it. That's where this medieval story suddenly becomes relevant to our own world. Modern financial centers work according to remarkably similar principles. Global cities don't become powerful because they produce everything themselves. They become powerful because they connect everything. The technology has changed. The underlying principle hasn't. Baghdad's rise challenges the idea that wealth naturally comes from conquest, resources, or cultural superiority. It doesn't. Wealth often follows structure. It grows where systems reward exchange, trust, knowledge, and cooperation. And Baghdad's decline gives us the other side of the lesson. No economic system is immune to fragmentation. When governance weakens, coordination disappears, and short-term extraction replaces long-term investment, even the richest city in the world can become vulnerable. This isn't really a story about winners and losers. It's a story about systems. Baghdad became one of history's greatest economic and intellectual centers because it learned how to move goods, capital, information, and trust across enormous distances. For centuries, it proved that prosperity could be designed, expanded, and sustained. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Wealth follows connection, power follows coordination, and when those disappear, decline doesn't always need an enemy. Sometimes the system simply stops working. If this gave you a new perspective on history, subscribe, because history has the answers.